Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by onX. The onX Hunt app is your premier GPS hunting app. Turns your mobile phone into a working GPS. And one of my favorite things about the Hunt app is even if you don't have cell service, that's not a problem. You can access the saved maps from anywhere in the world and locate yourself in the wild. And so what you can do is you can find your map area where you're planning on hunting and download that area right to your phone. So again, you can be on airplane mode. You don't need service and it'll work. But what's been really great with the recent updates has made that process so much faster. You'll hear about Jared from onX talking about it in this episode, but the download speed is incredible. Just this weekend, I was driving to my hunting spot and forgot to download the maps and did it on the way without even using Wi-Fi and had the whole maps downloaded in very, very short amount of time. So if you want to check out the onX Hunt app and be able to, turn your phone into a mobile GPS unit, then head over to onxmaps.com, use the coupon code EMW, and that'll save yourself 20% off of the app. Elk 101 and Corey Jacobson have put together the most fully comprehensive elk hunting learning course available, and that is the University of Elk Hunting. By going through all these different modules from beginning to end, from the planning phases, from, right now, getting ready for tag application season, whether you're planning an over-the-counter hunt in Colorado or wherever, you can start planning those hunts by using the University of Elk Hunting and use that the whole way along, getting ready as far as your physical fitness, how to budget for the hunt, how to go through with elk calling, with elk behavior, and everything in between. It's all in one place. You don't need to be searching forums, doing all this stuff. It's all on elk101.com and the University of Elk Hunting. Use the coupon code EastMeetsWest. You'll save yourself 20% off a 1-year membership. And last but not least, Tethered. Tethered has been creating the lightest weight, safest mobile hunting gear on the planet, and they're doing that not just by coming out with great products, but they're doing that by educating you on saddle hunting and what that's all about. They have so many different resources that are free to you on the website, and if you think you want to try it out, the products are second to none, including they have 2 new saddles that are out and are actually on sale right now. So if you're listening to this live here in the beginning of December, the new Menace saddle as well as the Eberhart Signature Series are both on sale, as well as some of their other ones here too, but those are both on sale. New ones out there. I think if you check them out, you will not be disappointed. So head over to tethernation.com to check that out. All right. So on today's episode, I have a buddy of mine, Jared Larsen, who works for onX. And Jared is coming on to talk about his Montana whitetail season. He had a great season overall. Jared traveled to some different states and killed some awesome bucks, but specifically I wanted to talk to him about Montana. And I think this episode is really cool. The story of his hunt is just incredible, and that's why I think Western whitetail hunting fascinates me so much, as you'll get to hear here. But before we get into that, if you happen to follow along with me on social media or anything else, then you may have known this already, but if not, then I finally ended up filling my Pennsylvania buck tag. So finally got a mountain buck down, and I don't know, it's incredible. It's one of those situations where it truly was how your entire season can change in an instant. So I killed my biggest buck to date, a giant 9-pointer, an old deer that I just took him over to the taxidermist, and he is aging him anywhere from 9.5 to 10.5 years old, which is that's just by looking at the teeth. I saved the bottom jaw to send it in to get a very accurate measurement, but he says he's pretty close on a lot of deer. So either way, it's an old whitetail, and it blows me away. As far as the score goes, we measured it out at 155 and 2/8 inches. That's just an unofficial gross score, but I just to kind of be able to explain the size of this deer. But I think what's more important about this deer and this hunt wasn't about myself or something I did or anything. It was more so I was in the right place at the right time with it. And I know that comes a lot with hunting, but it came down to having just incredible people surrounding me and to be able to help out in this. So we were at camp I'm not going to go into the full entire story of this right now. I'm going to give you a pretty good synopsis, but I'm going to bring my buddy and past guest, Johnny Stewart, on, and hopefully my dad as well, to be able to talk about through the whole hunt and history of this deer. But that I want to save some of that information for when I get those guys on here to be able to tell the story a little bit better. But essentially, we were at camp Friday night, and I was planning on hunting this buck I've talked about on here before, and going in after this big 10 point, and just we're a little bit frustrated, and same with Johnny. We've both been having some close calls and just haven't came through. And he's like, you know what, Beau, why don't we just go together tomorrow? He's like, I got an area that we can go into and check it out. And we were looking at this spot, and it was perfect from the stance of the way the wind was going to be coming from. I think it was a northwest wind. And if you remember, I did the Mountain Buck Scouting series on my YouTube channel, and the one specifically about buck bedding talks about how bucks, and I'm not the first one to say this, so let me say that first, but talk about how bucks like to bed, off of the points of the hills on the leeward side. And so on the side that the wind is blowing over, and essentially, there was a couple different points coming off these ridges that made it good for bedding with that wind. So as we were talking, my dad was there, and he's like, "Hey, I'll come and do a few, one man pushes to you." And if you're not from Pennsylvania, I'm not sure if any other states really do this, but actually the hunting public's kind of made it popular again. But in rifle season in Pennsylvania, a lot of times we'll do. Some people do giant deer drives where they have 10 people pushing the side of a mountainside. But the way that myself and some of my family's done it has to do with just 1 or 2 man kind of bump drives, almost like wind bumping a little bit, and kind of just coming through the side of the hill and hoping to kind of bump a deer out of their bed and come towards whoever was sitting down. So, but for the size of the hills or mountains or whatever you want to call them that we were hunting, we realized pretty quick in the morning on Saturday that was difficult to do with one person, pushing. But we were going to do the last drive before we went out on our own, and Johnny was going to go sit somewhere for the evening, and so was I. But him and I set up along this point, and he was up towards the upper third, and I was down really kind of in the bottom third, from the half to the bottom third there. And my dad just came around the mountain there and pushed out this deer to me. And what happened was I looked, and so there was a hemlock thicket kind of in front of me, and then some oak trees that I was sitting in, and I was sitting right on the edge. So talking about edges, again, going back to the scouting series and a bunch of different episodes I've talked about on here's the edges. So that's why, well, essentially a lot of the reason Johnny's been hunting this area and why we set up the way that we did was on the edge of this hemlocks. And so, and also I was on a slight bench, not a big bench, just a slight bench. It's almost tough to be able to see with topo lines, but you can see it a little bit. And I was hunting the same elevation line as some places where he had cameras set up and scrapes where it seemed to be the bucks were using it, kind of on the upper edge of where the oaks head ended, where the acorns were about done. And we're set up there. So my dad came around. I caught a glimpse of what looked like an antler sticking out of the hemlocks coming. I mean, this is close. I'm only set up 20 yards from these hemlocks. And I could see the glimpse of an antler. And I went to pull up my scope, and the deer started to walk and kind of looking behind him. And all of a sudden, it walked right into my scope, and I just saw one of the biggest frames I'd ever seen. And at that point, I put the crosshairs right. It was a frontal, basically a full frontal shot, hard quartering 2. Put it right there, and shot him. And the buck did a big mule kick and ran about 10 feet, and I ended up putting another shot into him just to make sure. He definitely would have went down on the first one, but never know, and I'm not going to leave that up to chance. So put another one in him, and the buck went down, and I just let out a scream, and I couldn't hold it in. It's been such an incredibly long season, and for that to be able to, for me to be able to walk up on that buck and ended up being a buck that Johnny has a ton of history with. It is an absolutely incredible public land, Pennsylvania, just mountain monarch to say the least. So, I was just talking about it last week on here and talking about it with a lot of people. It's even when you're having a tough season, you just got to keep going and got to keep pushing it. And sometimes that takes changing up the plans. I'm not going to sit here and say I take a ton of credit for this deer. Not at all. Johnny was the man behind the plan there, and is not only so intelligent when it comes to deer, along with my dad, but also just extremely generous with, not many people would take someone else into their hunting area, and he was just as pumped that I got it as if he would have. And I think that's something to speak of his character and everything. So I guess I even went into this a little more detail than I was planning on it, but we'll talk more about the strategy and hear Johnny's take on it as well when I get him on here shortly. Hopefully be able to record this when he comes back this way to hunt this weekend. So anyways, thanks to everyone who had sent me out some very positive messages. That means a ton. Like it does. It means a ton to be able to hear that. So I am pumped to be able to share this news, and I'm going to ride this high for quite a while. I said, I'm like, well, I'm taking a break from going in the woods, but I know that'll last like 4 days. So anyways, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Jared Larsen. We're live, and that's the sound of a cold bush latte cracking across the computer screen here with my buddy Jared Larsen. What's going on, brother?
Not a whole lot, Beau. I appreciate you having me on. It's a beautiful evening out here in Missoula, Montana, and drinking a few bush lattes in your name.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's awesome. Jared, you and I have known each other for, it feels like quite a while. I think it's been, I don't know, 4 years, something like that.
Probably?
Yeah. That's
in this virtual age of knowing each other.
Yeah, I know. We've never met in person, so hopefully that can change here. Maybe next year when I come out to Montana or something, we'll link up.
Well, I'm thinking one of these times when Justin's toting the camera around, I better just join, and we better figure out an onX feature film to make happen.
I think we can do that. That'd be pretty sweet, I'd say.
Well, I've been telling Justin to scheme up a good idea for not quite 3 years, but probably 2 at this point, and his bum ass is yet to yet. So,
You know what? He's just lazy. I'm just kidding.
I mean, he has enough car time to think about enough stuff.
I know, right? No, it's Justin, and we're just joking about it, but he's hilarious. You can tell when he's on his long car trips, he'll just send me these wild ideas he comes up with, and that's when he does like the best thinking. Like when he'll be like, I have this idea for an intro to the film, and he's like just runs it through me. He's like, you're gonna come in and do this, and he's like, I watched this movie and I got this idea. I'm like, when are you doing all this stuff? He's like, I drive a lot.
I'm sure, if you drive as much as that kid does, you have to be like downloading movies, and I got a phone set up on the dash. I don't know how else he did it.
Yeah, he's something else. He sent me a Snapchat the other day. He's like, yeah, he needs an oil change, and he just got one like a month ago in his car. I'm just like, holy cow.
That's hilarious.
Anyways, Jared, you want to give a little introduction, who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah, for sure. So I work for onX Hunt out here based in Missoula, Montana. And my technical title is a marketing specialist, so do with that what you will. But I handle all whitetail ambassador partner relations, and then lead a lot of the marketing strategy for whitetail, waterfowl, and turkey. So been doing that. Been at onX for 3 years. Actually started in customer support. So worked my way up, and now doing this. And whitetails are really my thing. I grew up in Wisconsin, went to school at Iowa State purely to get resident deer tags in Iowa. And fortunately, all that bold play worked out for me. And now that's what I get to do on a daily basis is basically just scheme up how to hunt whitetails more.
Yeah, I'm pretty jealous of that, I'd have to say. But it seems like you guys over at onX too have a pretty cool group of people, like a really tight niche community there. So
yeah, it's a super cool place to work. Honestly, like I love the work from home aspect. Like that is a lot of freedom and frankly more hunting opportunities, just because it's like, you know what? It's 2:30. All my stuff that I need to have done is done. I'm gonna go hunting, Whereas like if you were in the office, you'd probably just like find something else to do or whatever. But
yeah,
now I'm working from home. But yeah, dude, I miss the office because it's a bunch of cool dudes and gals that are pretty much all of them love to do things in the outdoors. And, that obviously comes through in the product creation that, we're not just folks sitting in the house. I mean, we're out there, we're putting the product to work, and, it obviously translates to having the best products and features and most stable products that's out there. And it's fun to be part of.
And that's one of the things that I've noticed, like from my observations of companies that I think are like the top in their game, are the employees are the ones using it and going through and really putting it through the ringer. Like you hunted, a ton this year, and oh wow, he gets to hunt, be off work, but in reality you're still working too. Like this is how you're improving the product. This is how you're scheming different ideas, and I think you're actually using it, which is you're putting yourself in the end user's position to be able to do that. And I think that's pretty huge.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've hunted more this fall with like a full-time grown-up job than like ever before previously. And it was just like, man, this is unbelievable. Granted, I answered thousands of emails from a tree stand this fall. But I'll take that trade-off. I'll happily answer emails all day from a tree stand. But I have to embarrassingly admit there was multiple sits in Iowa and Wisconsin where I wanted to sit somewhere else, but I felt guilty enough about work that I chose stand location based upon cell service.
I was just going to ask that if that came into play.
Yeah, it really did. I can't really say it cost me any deer per se, but I guess we'll never truly know.
Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, that was going to be my next question was, did you ever screw up because you were looking at your phone like a deer?
Dude, are you kidding me? Of course. I mean, I don't know how much you're on your phone when you're in the tree stands. I saw a poll somewhere while I was sitting in my tree stand this year. It's like plus or minus 50% you're on your phone while in a tree stand. I'm definitely plus. Like, Oh, like especially if I have like work stuff to do, which in the height of the busy season is pretty much always. I can't tell you how many like little bucks were like sitting there like looking at me before I was looking at them. And I was like, damn.
Yeah.
But on it, somehow it never cost me with a mature one.
Yeah, that's good. And I guess, I mean, there's that trade-off there. If you couldn't work and you had to be in the office, then you would have zero opportunities. So
Yes. Oh, 100%.
that's the way I would look at it. It's funny, this year the spots that I was hunting had cell service, where most of the time, a lot of times I would be in places that don't have any. And I'm, it's embarrassing to say, but I struggle with those all day sits when I don't have my phone and the battery charger, that's right there. And like, I like being able to disconnect, and stuff on hunts and everything. But at the same time, when you're in a tree stand, that can be boring. It's different on an elk hunt.
Minus a 50%.
I'd say I'm right around 50, maybe a little plus when I do have service. Yeah. Like there's like certain times, like I tell myself the first hour of daylight and the last hour, like you don't go near it, but like the middle of the day and stuff, it's like.
But at the same time, I mean, you tell me when your best buck killing hours are, but mine are middle of the day.
Yeah. And actually it's funny you say that, because I do that. I was talking to Justin about that. I've killed the last 3 bucks that I've killed between noon and 2. Actually, like I've actually killed 2 noon on the dot. Like yeah. And I had an encounter this year. I was on my phone. I was actually taking a picture of my bow because I had a problem with it, and I was sending it to the guys at Prime. And I was sending the picture, and I look up, and there's a young like 2.5-year-old 8-point staring at my decoy, and I'm like, whoa, it just came out of nowhere, and I was like, it didn't screw me, but it was just like it was kind of funny.
Oh yeah. So you hunted over a decoy a little bit this year. Give me the 30-second synopsis and opinion of decoy hunting.
I love decoys, so I actually use one on almost every single hunt. And the reason why I not like early season, but like during my rut style hunts, is because what I've noticed is a lot of these bucks don't want to come out of the super thick stuff, and I can't hunt like in the spots where it's so brushy and briars and stuff because my arrow won't get through. Sure. And so I'll sit like just off of that thick stuff where there's like a little bit of an opening. But I've had it where, because I call a lot, so they'll come and they'll stop at that thick stuff and look out in the opening, and they won't come out unless they have a visual. So that decoys help pull them out. But I've also had where it can scare them. So it's like, I'd say about 65% of the time it's worked for me, and another 35 where they've darted, which is pretty good. Like I'll take those odds.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I use the Montana decoy, the 2-dimensional one. Oh, it's
the freshman buck.
No, the Dreamy Doe.
I
named her Janelle.
Damn.
I named her Janelle, and so Janelle, you have to angle her right, because like if they come and spin around behind her or in front of her, and it's 2-dimensional, they freak out. It's hilarious watching small bucks do that, and then they like spin around, they see her again, and they're jumping back. And, oh yeah, but I'm a big fan of decoys for the certain situation. That's what I like to use. If it's like, it all depends on the situation, but
right on.
I always have it in my pack essentially, and depending on the setup, whether I throw her out or not. And I do have the buck one too, the little guy. What do you call him?
The freshman buck. My boss Zach, dude, he is all about the freshman buck.
Yeah, I got the freshman buck too, and I just haven't used him much. I bought the package. I got both of them in the package off Amazon, and my dad used them a lot and has had luck. So I started using them a few years ago and had some good luck with it. So
yeah. See, like I really love the thought of like hunting over a decoy. Like when Hunsucker posts some video of some like buck just absolutely demolishing his Dave Smith buck, and I'm like, I ain't never gonna buy a Dave Smith decoy. Believe that. But like. Sam Sohol was telling me that I should like get a heads up decoy because he's had such success with them in Kansas.
Yep.
And I just hunt so much. I wouldn't call it open country, but compared to what you're hunting, a lot of ag edges or like CRP edges and stuff like that. And I ran a decoy a few times in Iowa this year, and it was just like, damn, dude, every deer that like came out in the field, immediately they were just like whipping their head around, like looking at that decoy, just like super suspect of it. Like, flag goes up and they kind of do that stupid little trot that just makes you a little bit mad inside.
Yeah, the where they're just like
the little
hard in the ground,
with like their head up. Yeah, dude, I hate that shit.
Yep, that if a doe does that too close, she's getting hit because I can't. I just get upset about it. Starts snorting at me.
Oh yeah, below she goes, man.
Well, so this year I started. This is funny, but I started snorting back at the deer when they do that, and it settles them down. A lot of the times, it'll settle them down, like to the point where, like I was doing that, and it was right getting dark, and this doe like literally pinned me down in the tree, and she's blowing at me. And she'd like walk a little bit away, and I just do it right back. And she'd come back out and look like wasn't sure what was going on. I was having so much fun with it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
So you just gotta hit him with the deer sound.
Yeah, you just gotta act like the deer, I guess. So I'm sure my snort doesn't sound real good. I don't know what it probably sounded like, but
I was gonna ask for a sample blow here on the podcast for
I'll give a sample blow.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, I think that could work.
Yeah, you gotta give it to him hard, and you gotta get in the moment. Like when I'm calling, I get into the, like, I pretend like I'm that deer. Like I put emotion into it. Like I'm like throwing my body around a little bit, and I don't know. It's just
we're gonna get off the topic that we initially discussed talking about here for a bit, because that just reminded me, dude. When I was younger, I don't remember what video it was. I think it was like some Primos video or something. But it wasn't like any well-recognized hunter that kind of like introed this idea into my head. But like he literally tied his rattling antlers onto his like bow rope. And then he had his grunt call in his mouth. And he was just like sitting up there, like jigging his rattling antlers. So they would like hit the leaves and like clank into one another while grunting. And I really thought that was like a brilliant idea at the age of 15. And so I rattled that way for a while. I can't say it did any better than just playing.
Yeah, that's when I'm on the ground, I'll do a lot of stuff with like digging up leaves and doing stuff. And like, I think that I've never tried it from the tree, but I've heard of people doing that exact thing before, It's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it personally, but like if you want to just make a boatload of movement and like do some ice fish jigging from your tree stands, yeah.
There you go. Take a pole with you.
yeah, exactly. Just cast them out and you can just like reel them back.
Yeah.
Just get some action going with them.
Like you're bass fishing a little bit, just throw it out there and pulling it across the top water. But
perfect.
So, Jared, to kind of get started on the topic that I wanted to talk to you about here. So you've had what I would consider a pretty incredible whitetail season, and it's been super fun to watch along on your Instagram and stuff, and just talking to you because we text back and forth, and it's been awesome. But what I want to talk about specifically is your Montana hunt for whitetail, and I want to hunt whitetails in Montana. My brother moved there, want to go there, and I think and maybe you don't want to talk how opportunistic it is, but at the same time, I want to kind of hear how this hunt, what it's like for you, like how you go into your scouting and what type of country, what type of terrain, what are you looking at?
Yeah. So, I mean, Montana as a whole is obviously, if you've never been here, it's super diverse from east to west. The whole massive chunk of the eastern part of the state is more like rolling hills with some junipers and like sagebrush and like little swales that, from a glassing knob don't appear to be much, but all of a sudden a deer disappears behind them and they're gone forever. But it also ranges to obviously the mountainous country everybody thinks of Montana as, but also just like so much river bottom, which like a lot of the river bottom in Montana is where the opportunity lies if you're interested in like a more true to style whitetail hunt where you might be hanging in a tree and not like spotting and stalking. And so, growing up, there's just something nostalgic about sitting in a tree. It's what I love to do. Do I love chasing bugles in September? Yeah, of course. But like, as soon as kind of like October gets there, my mind is getting to be in a tree. And so it's actually the spot that I hunt a lot of whitetails in is a river bottom. And there's not a ton of public, but there's enough public that like you can kind of get away from people if you're strategic about it. And also, like anywhere using the Hunt app, hunting borders, man. That's always seems to be the answer, is hunting borders. And so for what I've been doing in this area, I've been hunting it. I mean, this was my third fall hunting it. So it wasn't like I went in there this summer and it just like clicked. This was like year one, absolute ass handed to me. Year two was like, okay, I saw some deer. I shot a doe. Like I found some like good bucks in their beds. Like when I was scouting, bumped them out. Like I know some things. And then this year is when it all kind of clicked. And so the country I'm working with is, if you look at it on a map, like on the onX, on your web map there, like you look at it, there's not a single topo line in like this 1,000-acre swath, just dead flat. And then it's mostly just like monotonous pine trees with like an intermix of just like little patches of aspen pockets where is like consistently wet. But then you have the river itself goes through this chunk. And then, you know, being a river and runoff and all that stuff, like new river channels are formed and created and like left to not be used every single year during runoff. So like it took me a while to figure out, and a lot of it was from like being ingrained with the hunting public and work, and just like the need for habitat diversity, which you talk a lot about as well in your big mountain stuff. And so like eventually it was just like, okay, these ponderosas are worthless. Like they're good for nothing. And so like it became pretty clear fairly quickly that it was like the aspens that needed to hold my focus. But then it was the problem of just being dead flat. So like when I got there and I finally was like seeing deer, I wasn't necessarily in the spot, or the spot, quote unquote, was really hard to find because there was nothing to funnel them. Like what they did on Monday, not what they did on Wednesday, you know, like they're not walking in the same particular places because there's a ridge that comes down here, or there's this, that.
Yeah, there's no train feature to help guide them.
No, other than the river. And the river is obviously, 70 yards wide, and that's where the river is. But outside of that, 1,000 acres is a pretty large chunk. So I literally, like, if I pulled up my onX web map right now, I started like drawing area shapes into areas. And I would just like, if they're a black area, never going back there. Like I've been there, I've seen it. I don't need that. And so like, I started like honing in, and like legitimately there was like, I think like 27 of the 1,000 acres is what I was like, this is it. So like, this is where I need to be. And it was like one little block that was like a 20-acre chunk. And then one little block that was like a 13, 16, something like that. And so like, literally I was like, these are the two chunks I'm hunting all year. And like, I know deer use these two chunks more than the other 980 acres combined, from my experience.
And is that because those areas had the aspen trees, or what? Okay.
So they were definitely just these little aspen thickets. Both of them were unsurprisingly near water. The one I killed on was right next to the main stem of the river. And then the other one was damn near a mile from that spot on just like this little tributary seepage creek that has water, but like it's not much water.
Yeah.
And so the spot I ended up killing in, actually, it was over a mile hike from any access point. You had to cross the river, which like full blown waders to do so. Like you're not, in the early season, you could just like do it in a pair of pants, but you were up to your belly button. And so like, I just started going into this area, pretty consistently in June, and I like hung trail cameras, and I would just go in there basically once a month. And I had no problem bumping bucks out. Like I went there knowing I would bump bucks out of it in the summer. And frankly, I wanted to, because I was like, I want to see what's here. And they were very consistently there. on a west wind and a north wind, but they were really hard to hunt on those winds because that's when they were playing the wind to be blown to them, from difficult to access spots.
Yep.
Obviously. And so I knew the caliber of bucks that were in there. There was a really good 10-pointer, probably something in the 50s. And then honestly, a slew of bucks similar to the one I shot that were more of like the 20s, 30s, probably 3 or 4 different bucks that were right in that realm. And so, yeah, I hung it a couple times in early September, and had great encounters, saw good bucks, not quite the right bucks, saw deer, but a lot of times it was tough because it was definitely their bedroom. Like they were bedding there. That's what they were there to do. And so getting out of the tree was difficult at times, when you have a buck bedded at 120 yards, it's a bit of a project to get out of there undetected, especially if you're not trying to leave your equipment there, which I pretty much hang and bang with my tethered setup every single time. Like, unless I know I'm going there within the next day or two, I'm pulling the whole thing.
Yep.
And so, yeah, eventually I got in there, and it was October the 4th was the day it all came together for me, which I think was probably my 4th or 5th hunt in there, but I had a ton of trail camera data. I had 3 trail cameras in that little 16-acre patch,
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember you sending me photos of the deer you ended up killing, I believe, and a couple others, and you were sending me pictures of it and everything else, and getting fired up for it, and I was pumped seeing it. I'm like, oh my, like those are all good bucks, and it just looked awesome. So before you go any further, was there like a food source they were heading to?
Dude, so it was right on this particular small chunk that I'd picked out was right on the edge of a vast private ownership, a ranch. But it's all pretty monotonous even on that ranch. Like that ranch starts to go up into the foothills of mountains. And so you have a few draws that come down, with some more juniper spruce tree type stuff. But there's no obvious food source. It's just grassy. I don't know. I honestly need to get better about my deer and what they're eating when it's not a cornfield or a bean field, what I'm used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cause honest to God, I don't really know what they're eating out there. But I knew they were bedding in this little aspen grove and doing it consistently, and they'd just lay there all day. Cause I had trail cameras set up in a manner on some existing beds, and I would get 60 pictures in a day of this buck just turning his head. He was there at 7:30 in the morning, and he was there until 5, 6 in the afternoon. That's where he was holed up for the day.
Did the trail cameras bother them at all on the bed?
So I don't know whether it's a gimmick or it's a real deal. I mean, obviously people hang them high for theft purposes.
Yeah.
But I hung them a little bit over my head height, which, probably 6.5 feet in the air is where I was hanging them, but they never seemed to bother. But I will caveat that with, I do believe that Montana whitetails are dumber than any other whitetails I've hunted. Legitimately, man, the whitetails I hunted in Oklahoma this year, the whitetail I've hunted in Wisconsin and Iowa my whole life, they're all wiser than Montana whitetails.
That's interesting.
Not to take anything away. I mean, there's still a critter out there.
Still a whitetail.
Eyes, but they don't seem to be super on edge. I'm sure you in the big woods experience some what I would call just crackhead deer. Doesn't matter what the sound is. They're just freaked out and on high alert, anxiety problems, man.
Yeah, I've got some deer that I'll have trail cameras on, good 10 yards off a trail, but I think it's kind of hidden. They'll walk by, I'll have it on video, boom, they lock their head on it, and they walk right up to it, and I never see them again on that camera. I've seen where they'll even walk around it, or if I have it on a scrape, they'll make a scrape 7 yards away on the other side of the tree, so they're not, some of them are just weird like that.
Dude.
And others just don't care. Some love getting their photos taken, and they're the influencer of the deer woods.
Well, if you want to hunt some influencers of the deer woods, Montana may be your spot.
I'll take that. I think I need some of that. But anyways, I didn't want to derail your story there. I just was wondering about the food and kind of a little bit more. But go back to the.
I wish I could tell you a little bit more about what they're eating.
No, I appreciate that honesty. That's good.
But so anyhow, it was purely a betting play, 100%. And honestly, like, dude, I remember hitting you up. I hit up like quite a few like folks that I work with. I was like, how would you hunt this? Because like I understand the need to like only hunt a certain wind. Like I'm only going to hunt the spot on a north wind. I get that. I understand it, but I have a really hard time playing by that rule. Like typically I have a full-time job. I'm getting to hunt Saturdays and Sundays for the most part. Now this year was somewhat of a caveat, obviously, but in Montana that held fairly true. Like I only had X days I could hunt. And so I was trying to make it happen on any wind that I was dealt. And so, I think on the particular morning that I shot my buck, it was like a southeast wind, which wasn't perfect, but was workable to get in there in the morning. And so I snuck in there, sweated the mile in, crossed the river, got set up. And maybe it's to a fault, but even I rarely hang in the same tree, and I need to get better about like picking an exact tree while I'm scouting and marking that on onX, because like I always just get into an area. I'm like, oh, this is a sweet area, and then mark that. But I get there in the dark. I'm like, wow, I really wish I had a tree.
Yeah. How true is that point? Like I've gotten better at it, but it took me a lot of mess ups before I was figuring, and still I get to that point. Like I'll be like so fast scouting. I'll be like, oh, this is a sweet spot. Like this is going to be awesome. I'll come back here and figure it out, and then I never come back there. And, cause I'm always just like wanting to see what's next, and picking that tree is such a big deal. And what I'll do is I'll take a photo of it in the waypoint. So when I go in and hit it with my headlamp, I'm like, okay, it's got this Y here, it's got this going on, so I can find it. And I'll even mark in my notes on onX, like go up until you hit this, where it breaks off here, probably 4 sticks high, face this direction. And I'll do that stuff because otherwise my brain doesn't hold that much information. So I forget all of it.
And the other problem is like, I mean, in this particular spot, it's an aspen grove. It's just like, clusters of aspens around. And I like vividly remember when I was in there, I was like, yep, that cluster of aspens looked good. But like a dumbass, I didn't do anything you just said. I just dropped a waypoint where I was standing and thought that cluster of aspen looks good would resonate at 4:30 in the morning sometime later.
Yeah.
And so, I picked my tree in the dark or whatever. And it was one of those feelings where immediately, like when you get up in your tree, and I guess I feel this way most times when I get up in my tree with my saddle set up, I'm like, well, shit, I wish I was in that tree 6 yards that way. It was just one of those deals. Like it was okay. Like I was in a good spot, but like I didn't have great shooting lanes. And you can obviously only do so much, when you're in your tree there. And so, it was a pretty phenomenal morning. Like even when I was walking in, there was bulls just ripping off bugles as I was walking in. And like, even as I was hanging my stand, and this spot, like it's super hit or miss. Either there's elk there and they're there or nothing. And so like this morning, they just happened to be there. And so I always have my bugle tube and my elk calls with me when I'm intending to whitetail hunt. And so there is this one particular bull that was on my side of the river. Most of the bulls were on the other side of the river. And like, I don't know, you've elk hunted enough where it's just like, that bull sounds like his ass is lonely. Like that just sounds like a lone bull. He doesn't have cows.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was just like the feeling I had about this bull that was on my side of the river, because ordinarily, like when I'm in the tree stand, unless I'm like really confident about it, I'm not just going to start ripping bugles right at, 10 minutes before shooting light, like right at prime time. But that's what I decided to do. I just started ripping bugles at this bull from my tree stand. And he kind of went quiet as shooting light got there. And so I was just like chilling, whatever. And all of a sudden I hear a stick break behind me. And so I like turn over my shoulder and look, and here it's the buck I end up shooting, which is a solid 120 or so inch 9-pointer, maybe a touch better than that. He has good frame on him, just not a lot of mass. But anyhow, he's working kind of towards me, like towards the bedding that I'm sitting over for sure. And so I'm like, okay. So I do the whole, 180 spin in the saddle and kind of grab my bow and get situated. But all of a sudden, before I know it, he's like with a group of, 6, 7 other bucks on October 4th. And so it's like, whoa, okay, we got a lot of eyes, ears, and noses here. And so it's like pretty still, and they're in no hurry. They're just milling about, kind of feeding amongst the grass and browse that's in this little aspen stand. And literally out of nowhere, like those bucks are just feeding. All of a sudden, this bull elk walks right through the middle of these 6, 7 bucks, like literally between some of them. Bucks don't pick their head up. Elk doesn't acknowledge the deer. Like, it's just like an everyday occurrence. And I'm like, what is happening? And so this bull, it's a raggy 5-point, a bull that is legal, and I would be absolutely thrilled to wrap my tag around. And so he kind of is like perpendicular in me at like 100 yards. And I'm sitting here like, do I cow call at this thing? Do I just sit here and let it play out? Like, what are these deer going to do? There's like way too much going on right now for me to even really understand.
You literally had you had the best scenario and the worst scenario in one, because like you had everything you could ever want, but at the same time you couldn't do much about it,
Yeah, I was just
you didn't know what to do.
In this tree at 90 yards from this bull elk and like 70 yards from this closest buck. And so like I just kind of sit there and just like let it play out. And like, no shit, this elk hops on a trail that literally walks like 6 yards below my tree. And it's just like a very prominent trail. Sometimes there's cattle in there. I think they're in there from like June to August. And so there's like some cow trails, and he hops on this cow trail. And so I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to shoot an elk from my tree. Like, this is the dream. This is amazing. And so this bull is just like, he goes from being at 100 yards to being at 60 yards in like 2 seconds, feels like 2 seconds. And so he gets to about 50 yards, and it's to the point where I'm like, release clipped. I'm probably going to draw back because my best shot at him is probably about 30 yards, just because I don't really want him right on top of me. And if he gets below my tree and by me, I don't really have much for shooting. And right at about that point where I'm like really getting ready, he decides just to take a hard right turn and like start going from 50 to 55 to 60. And so I'm like, oh crap, like it's kind of now or never. So like I grab the rangefinder and I start ranging trees. Range one at like, I think it was at like 62 yards, and he walks just behind that tree. And so like whitetails at 64 yards, never am I taking that shot. Bull elk, yeah, I feel pretty good, like very good about that shot. And so I drew back, and I definitely mewed at him to stop, but I didn't have like a call in my mouth, which was probably stupid. And he definitely like swung his head around, and it was one of those stops where you knew he was like, that was wrong. And so whatever clicked in my brain in that millisecond was like, you don't have time to think about this one. And I rushed the heck out of that shot, and I watched that arrow just sail clear over his back. And I knew the exact yardage. I literally dialed my black gold to 62 yards. Like, it was all there, and I just pooched it. Yeah, it was. And it was one of those things where I was like, what just happened? So I shot that arrow. The bull obviously runs off. Like, I don't know if you've ever been down range when somebody shoots an arrow, but it's like a missile's coming at you.
Yeah.
And so like he scampers off. The deer, no clue. They didn't even pick their head up, and they're at 70 yards, a little bit like in a different direction somewhat, but like nothing happened. And so I was like, you have got to be kidding me. So I knock another arrow, and this whole little bachelor group of deer comes freaking walking right to me, man. Like, I had, some of them were at 6 yards, some of them were at 40 yards, but literally every single buck, which again, there was somewhere between 6 and 8. It was hard to keep track of them, honestly. In this group, all of them were within bow range. All of them, but the one I wanted to shoot, were shootable at multiple points. And like the buck I ended up shooting, which was the only buck in the group that I wanted to shoot, he was just doing, good buck things and just not going into killable locations. And eventually, like, these two marginal bucks start like sparring a little bit. And one of them like kind of runs off with his tail tucked. And all of a sudden my buck just decided that was enough of the other little buck winning any type of scrums. And so he walked his ass right into a shooting lane at 37 yards. And I really didn't give it a whole lot of thought after that. I was like, well, you're in bow range, I'm killing you. And so he like sparred with this little buck for a minute and like picked his head up, and I thumped him at that point. I hit him a little bit high shoulder, but like, he was bulldozing within 30 yards of the shot, and he like bedded down 30 yards from where I hit him. And I just couldn't get another arrow in him at 60 yards there. And eventually the other bucks actually bumped him into some thick cover, not far from me. But I was like, that's a dead deer laying down. Like he's feeling rough.
Yeah.
And so like, I just snuck down out of my tree, like crawled out, the few hundred yards to the river, and I don't know. My thing is I always call my old man and I always call my brother after I shoot a deer. Like, those are just two phone calls I always make. So just talk to them, whatever. And I'm just kind of chilling. And all of a sudden, like, these bulls from this morning on the other side of the river just start piping off at 10 in the morning. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll go try to shoot an elk while I'm waiting for my blood track job on this deer. And so I literally chased a mega herd of elk. I counted 9 different bulls, and well north of 50 cows. Honestly, it would not surprise me at all if there was close to 100 cows. But for a solid 2 hours, I was just chasing screaming bulls. And it's pretty open and dead flat. Again, 0 topo lines. So I'm just like belly crawling behind deadfalls or like hiding behind a tree. And this whole massive herd of elk is within 200 yards for 2 hours. And so, it was just like one of those things where you really couldn't do much. That many ears and eyes and noses. And like, you try to get into bow range, and then like 2 bulls start getting pissed off at each other, and then the whole herd runs around. And so eventually, like, the group kind of split up into 2 groups, and I followed, frankly, the lesser of the 2 groups. And I ended up just like sitting on this herd. I crawled into where they bedded down, got to 30 yards from the closest elk, just belly crawling really slow, trying to keep trees between, any elk that I could visually see. And I got to this ponderosa pine, and there was, 30 cows within 50 yards, and I could see 2 bulls like clear as day. They were like raking trees. They'd bugle once in a while. It was, again, one of those scenarios where it's like, okay, I'm at 30 yards. There are so many elk here. I would love to try to blow a bugle and get that bull from, the middle of the herd to my edge of the herd. Or I'd love to like blow elk or a little cow call, some type of little estrus, like squeaky mew type deal to see if he might come over there. But I'm like, I can see 10 cows' eyeballs. Like,
yeah, they would pick you up. And
like gig is going to be up. That's not going to fly. And so I literally sat there for probably an hour and change behind this tree. And these elk are just bedded, just chilling, like chewing their cud. And eventually I was like, you know what, Jared, like, you're getting a little greedy here. You just stuck a great buck. You missed a bull, and you have like 10 cow elk in range. That is a full freezer and eating very happily for a very long time. And so I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to shoot this cow that's right here at 37 yards. Like as soon as I either feel confident about this bedded shot or I'm going to mew and make her stand up. And so I opted for the mew to make her stand up option, and it worked like a dream. I blew a little mew. She immediately stood up, slightly quartered away, 37 yards, let it fly. Like, honestly, I wouldn't have placed the arrow any differently. Like, maybe it was an inch lower than I would have wanted, but like aimed at the opposite front shoulder, went right to it. I like thought I smoked her. Like, I was like, holy shit, what have I just done? Because it was about 70 degrees and I had a cow elk and a buck to pack out. And it was like 1 p.m. And so I was like, wow, I need to call for some help. And so like I start calling buddies, most of which who are also in the mountains elk hunting. So not getting real successful here. Find one buddy who is a recent dad, and he's like, yeah, I got my kid, but I could probably haul out a front quarter. And then so he's like, he comes out, and I get another buddy to come out. And dude, we looked for that cow elk first because I thought she was just going to be stone dead. We ended up looking for 4 hours for that thing initially upon impact. Never found arrow, never found blood, never found anything. I'm positive that I hit her, and like I like to think I know where I hit her. But we looked for 4 hours that day. Kind of gave up on that search for the day. Went and found my buck. He was dead right where I left him. And so like dealt with the buck, packed it out in the dark, came back the next morning and looked for I looked for most of the next entire day. That was a Sunday, for that cow elk. And I never found a sign of anything on that deer.
Really?
Or on that elk. Yeah. No blood, no arrow, no anything. And I mean, when I shot that thing, again, there was probably 40 elk laying with her. I mean, it was just an eruption of pure chaos. So like immediately I saw fletchings berry, wasn't a pass through. Like when she turned, I probably saw like 3 inches of arrow sticking out of her maybe. So, I mean, pretty full penetration. My best guess is it lodged into her opposite shoulder. But yeah, dude, I mean, that was crazy. The buck was high shoulder. I just smashed through the shoulder, shooting some fixed blades, got the onside one lung and just took him a little bit to expire. But yeah, he was dead right where I left him. But
oh man,
all in all, I launched an arrow at a bull elk at sunrise, shot a very nice whitetail 45 minutes later. And then 3 hours after that, shot a cow elk and just had the craziest elk hunts of my life for sure.
That is incredible. And Jared, you called me. I don't know if it was maybe a day later or whatever. And were telling me, this story. And I was like, oh my, that's like a dream day. Like believe me, I know you would have much rather hit the first bull and then got your cow and stuff. But just as far as opportunities and experience, like you don't get days like that.
I mean, I have a boatload of video from my phone because like this year I really was like, you know what? Anytime you have an opportunity where it's not like immediately you have to kill this thing, film it through your binos, man. Just like, I love going back and looking at that.
Yeah.
It's
awesome.
I don't know. It just brings me joy. And so like, I have just like a bunch of video of these bull elk just screaming their ass off at like these herds of cows and like cows just running everywhere. And like, I've relived that. A lot of times when I do it is when I'm sitting in a tree stand bored off my ass. Like, let's go scroll up some photos and see what I was doing in September.
I have like a ridiculous, like, I think it's like 11,000 photos and videos on my phone. And I go through like all of them during the deer season, like just sitting there in my tree, especially if I don't have service. That's like my number one thing.
Yeah. There's nothing else to do.
No,
absolutely. So yeah, dude, I mean, it was a day of hunting that'll live in infamy for me forever. I mean, I'll never forget that one. As you said, it could have turned out a little better, but I mean, another thing that I just like to talk about with people, and you and I talked about this a little bit before we started recording the show, but I mean, just the very, very small margin of error you have with archery equipment like, I mean, I don't care whether it's a bull elk, a cow elk, a whitetail doe, or a Boone and Crockett buck. Like, maiming and not finding an animal hurts pretty much all the same. Sure, a mature buck or a bull is going to sting a little bit more than antlerless of whatever variety, but I just the turmoil that brings is so shitty. And just, I mean, being an archery hunter, I mean, my boss put it into pretty good perspective, just because obviously at the office we share all these stories, and he's like, dude, the moment you picked up a bow, you had to accept the fact that, like, that's part of bow hunting. Like, I don't care who you are, how much you practice, it's gonna happen, and it just sucks.
Yeah, there's no way around it. Like, if you've said that, you know, you never had a bad shot, or you know, something happened, you know, I'm either gonna call you a liar, or you haven't been bow hunting long enough. And I don't, you know, I'm not like you said, like, you can practice as much as you want, do everything right, which I a huge advocate for that. But like, there's still things that happen. I talked to you about before. I've talked about it on this podcast before. Last year when I shot a whitetail, one lung, tracked him for like 2 miles, all this stuff, and the guy ended up killing him like 3 weeks later in rifle season. Like, he lived through a one lung hit, like 100% pass through, and just like, it blew my mind that, like, they are just strong ass animals, and there's just such a margin for error with a bow, and yeah, you have to accept that sometimes.
Yeah, which
it never gets easier.
No, it never gets easier. And it's like, yeah, I can't tell you, like, well, a lot of people listening know the hopeless feeling of just grid searching, man. Like, especially when I had buddies out there doing it with me, it was just like every moment I was like, dude, I just need somebody to yell, like somebody to yell, Jerry, you know, like, you're just waiting for it.
Yeah.
And when it never comes, it's just like, wow.
Well, I know, even like, so when Justin was out here filming me, I shot a coyote, and we were filming it so I could see exactly where I hit. I buried it absolutely perfect. There was not a drop of blood. And I went to look, and I'm like, there's no way. Like, is this my, like, we did like a little grid search, and then I'm like, he's in this buck bedding area. I'm like, screw this coyote. He's killing me here. And I ended up, Justin went back to the tree, and I said, I'm going to keep looking over this way. And he didn't go very far. He went like 120 yards, but no blood. Maybe he did bleed, and I just couldn't see where he went. But anyways, I found him laying next to a buck bed in this giant rub, just deader than a doornail. And it hit perfect. But like, yeah, he got the last laugh. He literally went right into that area. And I was like, oh, it... That's a different story, but it was funny when Justin said to me, he's like, you know, he goes, I film a lot of people, and like, some won't shoot coyotes or something. They're worried about like screwing up their hunt. He's like, I love it. You got just as excited, like, as pumped up for shooting a coyote as you did a deer. I don't know. I love the whole thing of it. If it makes me happy, gets me pumped up, I'm all about it.
Opportunistic, baby.
Yep, I love it. That's the same thing.
Well, you know? And if I know anything about your big woods, it's not like opportunity comes knocking every day. So.
You know, it's funny. You sent me a message when I shared a story of a buck that I passed on. That was a 3-year-old 8-point. You're like, if that's a 3-year-old, I feel bad for you guys in Pennsylvania. And and like, it's true. Like, sometimes you'll get 3-year-olds that'll hit 120 inches, or you'll hit 3-year-olds that are, you know, 105 inches. Like,
to give you guys some context, I was sitting in Iowa where I was having encounters with incredible whitetails just about every single day. Beau posts this like 65-inch buck on his story and captions it a 3-year-old. And I was like, damn, this guy.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, the only way you can tell is just their bodies, because sometimes their antlers don't.
He was a stout little bastard. Yeah, but he didn't have much going on upstairs.
No, he didn't. And it's funny, like, it's when you talk about opportunistic. Like, for me, I feel like I'm at a point. I'm not someone that's like, I don't consider myself an expert with anything or whatever. But like, I try. My goal, like this year, I was hunting a specific buck, and I knew that my odds were low at that, but I was really trying. But at the same time, I'm not a person, for me, that that's the only deer I'm going to shoot. It all depends on that moment. Like there could be a small 3-year-old that comes in that gets me excited the one day and I'll shoot him. And there'll be other days that I won't even pick up my bow, and I can't really explain it, but it just, for me, it's like, I know it when it happens on what I want to do.
I like to say my hand decides, dude, because I'm the exact same way. Like if I see a buck, usually it's pretty immediate that like, if I see a buck, I want to shoot, my hand is like immediately just reaching for my bow. Like it's not conscious. It's just like, yup, that's going to do it. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that sentiment.
I've done it before too, where like I'd shoot and I'd be like, was that a good deer? Like I just got so in the moment and got like,
I just blacked out. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what I
blacked out. Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome.
But yeah, that's so cool. And you know, that hunt just sounds, it's so different from the style of hunting that I'm doing. And I think that's what intrigues me about it. Like, it's just, I love whitetails because they live in so many different places, and they're almost like different animals in different places. And
100%.
It's incredible. Like for me, I want to see it all. Like eventually I want to hunt them in all these different places. And it's like to hunt them with bugling elk and like everything else there. There's a spot in Pennsylvania that I've hunted last year actually a lot that had elk in there, and I was listening to bulls bugling and fighting, and there's coyotes howling over here, and it was just like fascinating to me.
Well, even if you don't see a deer, it's like, that's sweet shit.
Yeah, exactly. Like I love that kind of stuff, and I love that aspect. Like I'd totally want to hunt, you know, Montana and some of the western, not even just Montana, but some of those western whitetail states to do something different, you know?
Dude, and that's the problem, man. Like, obviously that's the problem for everybody is time, resources, and money resources. But like, I have come to find that I'm such a whitetail guy. Even after living in Montana, like chasing elk is awesome. Like, don't ever get it twisted. Like, it's amazing, but it's never going to be like my thing. Like, whitetails are my thing. And like getting to hunt Wisconsin, Montana, Oklahoma, and Iowa this year, all it did was make me, I was like already scheming with some buddies. I was like, yo, dudes, we should put in for Kansas this year and like go hit Kansas and do like the public walk-in thing. And then I was like scheming with like Philip Culpepper, and I was like, yo, dude, what's going on in Mississippi in about January? I'd love to come see what's going on down there. And so it's just like, man, I just want to see what these deer are like everywhere, because I promise you, the whitetail in Montana to Iowa to Wisconsin, I mean, the Iowa and Wisconsin deer are pretty similar. The Montana deer and the Oklahoma deer, and though the Midwest, upper Midwest deer, all very different. Like out here in Montana, less wary, far more of like a herd animal. You know, like you'll see, I mean, obviously you see the dreary and the hunsuckers, and like they have 60 deer in their food plot or something, but I don't ever see that. Like in Montana, all of a sudden you get this just like crappy looking like little ag field, and there's 150 whitetails in it. And you're like, what? Yeah. What's going on here? And then in like Oklahoma, I don't know. There just seemed like different deer there. I mean, I don't have a long enough sample size there, but like they weren't nearly as alert as upper Midwest deer. But like when they caught you, they were like out of there. Whereas in like Montana, they give you kind of, I wouldn't say a second chance, but they're not like immediately like in the next county. I don't know, man. They're crazy animals.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I like I said, I totally want to hunt all these places as you do, and I'm pumped from it. Like, so you may or may not know this because you're a resident in Montana, right?
Yeah.
So do you know as far as how to obtain a non-resident whitetail tag or deer tag there?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the general deer tag in Montana, you do have to apply for it, but you can buy a preference point before the application. Applications usually do like March 15th, I believe, is the annual date for that for deer, elk, and lion in Montana. And so you can buy a preference point before that. So essentially you're applying with 1 point, and the preference point, it costs like $50 or something like that. And I think that gets you right around an 80% draw as far as if you just want a general deer tag, which you can shoot a whitetail or a mule deer with it. You can just only hunt in general units. which I don't know. I think you can shoot a whitetail in any unit as a general. Don't quote me on that. And then mule deer, there are definitely like some specific units. Like for instance, like unit 270 is a premier mule deer unit in the country and takes, freaking 20 points to have a 2% chance to draw. But yeah, a general deer tag covers a vast majority of the state of Montana for whitetails or mule deer, $600. So it's definitely a price tag to it, but it's an incredible opportunity. And you get to hunt bow or rifle. It's not like you're pigeonholed. So if you want to come out here and chase them with your bow in October, and then if you don't fill your tag, you want to come out and do a November rifle hunt, more power to you. Burn some gas money.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. The fact that you can, I like when you can do that. I think Idaho does that too.
Comes right back to me and you being opportunistic, man.
Yep.
That's all about the opportunity.
Yep, I totally agree. Like that's, yeah, I'm pumped. Like I said, I think I'm gonna have to buy a tag. I'm gonna apply for an elk tag. I think this year is my plan. It's funny. So I'm planning 2021 hunts, but I told like just me and a couple guys that my cousin Mason, buddy Michael went on the caribou hunt. We planned together. We've been putting in points together. We said we're not going to plan our hunts until we tag out on whitetails. We all expected to be tagged out in archery, and Mason was the only one that did. So we've been put behind on the whole applying thing or like planning things out yet because I'm still going after
making planning contingent on harvest success in the whitetail woods was not wise. That's for sure.
No, I know better.
Only wise if you didn't want to go on hunting trips.
I know. Like it's. Do you see how Idaho changed their system this year?
Dude, oh my God. There was a whole Slack thread going on at the onX office because nobody could figure out what the hell those regulations say.
Yeah. And like I right now, if I wanted to hunt the spot I hunted over the counter, I bought the tag in August 2 years ago. It's already gone. Like I can't even hunt there if I wanted to. They sold out of tags already. They made it so
already?
Yeah.
It's December.
December 1st they went on sale and they put a cap on every zone. So all of the better zones sold out already.
I literally didn't even know that because like it was so confusing when I read the regulations that were posted in our little message board here that I was like, you know what? This isn't for November. This is for February during application season when I'm bored at night. But well, turns out if I wanted to hunt Idaho, I pooched it.
Yep. It's crazy to me actually, but I mean, I get it because it's going to help probably the quality of hunting, but at the same time, it can't be a backup plan for me anymore. You almost got to buy the tag up front. I don't know.
Dude, well now it's just Colorado at this point as far as
for just regular counter. You're 100% right, which is crazy.
Except maybe the Utah spike tags are still that way.
I can't remember off the top of my head. I can't
either, but I think you might even have to apply for those.
Yeah. So you can't just like decide you're gonna go to Walmart and buy a tag.
Colorado elk herd.
Oh, that herd's getting smoked.
Brutal. Damn. Well, and speaking of application deadlines, dude, your Alaskan mentions. So my sister is an Alaskan resident.
Yes.
And, I've gotten very serious over the last 2 days with our Dall sheep hunt planning. And so I think we have some drainages narrowed down and that application is going in for me. I don't know about tonight, but this week for sure. Cause that deadline's 15.
Oh man. Are you getting pumped about that?
Dude, no, at this point I'm just like the list of gear that I need to acquire, the largest of which being a pack raft. And then the logistical planning aspect of it. I mean, we're just to the point where it's like, okay, now we actually have to start figuring shit out. So,
yep.
I mean, it all falls into place, as you know, but it's just stressful at this point still.
Yeah. I hear you.
And the biggest part was so like I'm sure I'm gonna butcher his last name, but Austin Mainlick of Mission, Alaska. He's been a dude that I've been in contact with like you for a few years now. And so I had this whole hunt plan laid out and this dude like guides in Alaska, and he he's about as hardcore as you'll find him. Goes on like 20-day solo Dall sheep hunts, like just nutty, Yeah.
Yeah.
Like not for
Hey,
me.
you saw a look on my face. It's like,
Yeah. And so I was like, I called him today and I was like, all right, dude, here's my hunt plan. Like, this is the drainage we're going into. And he's like, you've got to be shitting me. I hunted that drainage last year. I'll tell you what, right now, that is going to be a long nature hike. And so like today, he just took a wrench and just wrecked my Dall sheep plans. But thankfully, he was a real homie about it and pointed me in some new directions to check out. But it was like literally like I was set on this unit, this drainage. We were doing it. And he's like, yeah, dude, I mean, if you want to go for it, it's pretty. I was like, well, I'm spending too much money for a pretty nature.
Yeah. Oh my.
So you know the drill though.
Yeah, I know what that's like. But hey, that's it sucks, but that's good information at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. Better now than in August.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess to shift gears here towards the end, what's new with onX and there's been some new things that have come out, some updates. Anything you want to mention on that side of it? I've been talking about it, in the intros to the podcast here, but I want to hear it right from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, so I always get myself into trouble during these segments on podcasts because I always give away more than I'm supposed to. So, I mean, obviously in the last couple months, you got the 3D for iOS and web, which is great for planning. And we are definitely in the works to make that, I guess I'll say, not only useful for planning, but useful for in the field as well. You guys can take your conceptions as you will there. And then, I mean, I don't know if you guys have saved maps recently, but just the speed of saving a map now is
incredible. Yeah.
It mind blows me. Even it's like under a minute. Sometimes I can get a map saved on not even on Wi-Fi, on like service. And the cool part there is like, I've been literally in the last month driving to a spot and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to save a map. And you can save it. And even if it only saves partially, that partially saved area will work. So like that's been a major boost in my liking of the app in and of itself. But yeah, we got some cool things coming down the pipe as far as upcoming features that I can lean you into. I mean, we're looking at working with a few pretty innovative companies in the industry. I mean, Beau knows about one kind of that leads into helping you figure out when you may or may not go deer hunting. Just around, some ability to maybe predict when you might sit in a tree versus when you might watch a football game. We got some pretty cool things based around just the usability of your content. So, I mean, right now we definitely give you an ability to organize it via, color, icon, this, that, and the other thing. Some abilities to organize that in a far better manner, into like folders per se. And then hopefully the ability to just share those a lot more readily. That's on the roadmap as well. So, obviously you can share like a single markup at this point, but we're definitely making strides to where like, hey, Beau, I want to share with you all my pins on my Wisconsin farm. So that's kind of the next, our next step and hurdle in sharing is like sharing mass markups, if you will. Because I think if you've shared markups, you've all been there. Like, I have to really share every single one of these. I can't just like select.
Yeah, that's gonna be super nice when you send me all your whitetail waypoints. When you send me the whole, you can categorize them and send them all.
I'll tell you right now, if you come out here to Montana deer hunting, man, we'll definitely link for sure. I don't have any secrets.
I know, I'm just messing with you, but that's cool, man.
But, yeah, dude. I mean, we got all sorts of things cooking up at onX. We cook things faster than we can possibly build them. So, yeah, we're always scheming.
That's awesome. I think that's pumped. The 3D feature is so cool. I've been pumped about using that. And like one of the things like for me that I've shared it with on this podcast before, but for whitetail hunting, like in the big woods, the mountains, like in the Appalachian range, I can find those kind of like hidden benches that you can see on topo lines, but they don't jump out at you as much, where now I can kind of see it and see how things flow together and make sense. Then I have like my trail cameras that are in there, and it's kind of helping me figure out how they're moving through it. And it's been super helpful.
Yeah. Well, and another thing on topo lines, I mean, like we're exploring the possibility of potentially getting, better topography, because I'm sure you've run into the situation where you're looking at onX and you're standing on a ridge and you're like, really? That's one topo line?
Yeah.
Because I've definitely been there, and like that definitely just helps like finding benches and finding that
Yep.
stuff. So, but yeah, 3D is now the answer there, obviously.
Yeah.
So that definitely makes the planning phase that much easier.
For sure. Well, Jared, where can people find some more about yourself personally, as well as onX, and give a few plugs here if you would?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, if you don't have onX yet, my simple and always go-to plug is like, for cheaper than a tank of gas, you can get a hunting products that you will use literally more than any other that you currently use. Maybe save your boots and weapon. So onxmaps.com, use code EMW at checkout, save yourself 20%. And then myself personally, Jared C. Larsen on Instagram. That's about where I'm at.
Awesome, buddy. I appreciate it. This story was awesome. I'm glad you're able to come on here and talk about it. And I hope to be able to talk to you soon and share some more stories and just general bullshit session.
Well, I mean, again, we'll plug Justin one more time to come up with a feature film idea worthy of my and Beau's presence for the next onX feature film with Justin Mueller behind the lens. So get to it, buddy.
I like it. Yeah, Justin, hopefully you should be able to listen to this. You got enough damn time in a car. So listen to it the whole way through.
I appreciate it, Beau.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, buddy. We'll see you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.